Then, this is where we follow in the story, it says, when he finally came to his senses. Now, finally, I have no idea how long finally is, right? Finally could be months. Finally could be, I've talked to some adult men that are still working through finally. Finally is years sometimes, right? Finally came to his senses. And he said to himself, at home, the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. Like all the servants at home have leftovers. And he says, I'll go home to my father and say, because this is how it works, right? I can hear my kids practicing the speech upstairs before they come downstairs, right? This is the canned speech, right? Everybody has this. If you're a parent, you know. I will go home and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son, which is true. And says, please take me on as one of your hired servants. So he returned home to his father. He comes home. And I love this verse. It says, and while he was still a long way off, while he was still just a speck in the distance, his father saw him coming. Filled with, what's the two words? Love and compassion. He ran to his son. He embraced him. And he kissed him. Adult parents with adult children, this is going to happen here too. I have warned them, and I have told them, and I have told them, and I've seen the future, and I know, this kid is me, and I've warned them and told them, right? And here they go. And if we're not careful, it's pretty clear to us that forgiveness, there's been no real forgiveness there. Because it really, once they make that turn, once that I'm sorry comes, it has to be accepted, right? It has to be accepted. And listen, I've had people tell me all the time, oh, Matt, you don't understand. I get it, I understand, but you don't understand what they did to me, right? You don't understand how many times they said I'm sorry and nothing's changed. Welcome to the world of counseling that we deal with all the time. You don't understand. And listen, just understand, I know there's exceptions. Look, I know there's exceptions. I know there's physical abuse issues. I know there's emotional abuse. I know there's things that could take years of counseling and things to see reconciliation happen or to see restoration happen. But listen, I'm just trying to tell you that you'll know whether forgiveness really is at the root, at the core, that you've chose the path of tension, that when you see a turn, when the I'm sorry comes, if the heart is filled with love and compassion. I'll tell you briefly, I was fired from a church, which is awesome because I'm your pastor now. That's so good. I was fired from a church, and it was a brutal thing. It was a betrayal, and I was so hurt by the church, and everything that I was, at one time feared the church would do, did to me. And it was a hard thing. And I harbored, I'm talking massive bitterness and resentment towards the pastor of the church. And it was years. I'm saying years. When I say years, think years, plural, right? Multiple years. I'd choose forgiveness, but it was like an onion. It's like peel a little layers, but there's a ton of bitterness still there. And I remember my wife and I having this conversation because it was several years, maybe 5 years after this experience, that we heard from another friend that the pastor had a health issue, like a massive health problem that came up. And I remember in that moment, my heart was soft. I remember in that moment, my heart was soft as in, well, that's not good. I would not want that for his family. That's not, I was broken for that pastor. And that's how I knew that forgiveness had actually happened, in that moment. Now, 2 years earlier, I couldn't have promised that would have been the case. There might have been something in me, something really dark that would have went, that's right, he deserves it. Does that make sense? Let's keep going with the story. The father runs out and kisses him. The son says to him, starts the speech, right? Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father interrupts him, because the speech was longer, right? He says, his father said to his servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. You know what that means? It meant that he was clean to the father. As filthy and disgusting as this story was, to everybody listening, the moment the father makes this choice, says, no, put the finest robe on him, was a sign of the father saying, you are clean. And he says, get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. You know what the ring was? The ring was the sign that you are my son. You will not be a servant. You're my son. And kill the calf we've been fattening. And then he goes on to say, what's the two words? must celebrate, right? We must celebrate. With a feast, for the son of mine who is dead is now returned to life. He was lost, but he's found. So the party began. What a beautiful, let me again, don't miss the big picture. What a beautiful picture of the heart of God for you and for me. That's what this parable is all about.